Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Celebrating Voices 2018. We would like to introduce Professor Lorentz Lessig, representing our host, Harvard Law School, this evening.
Thank you very much. This is a very special moment for me because it's the first time the dean has ever asked me to welcome anybody to the law school. And I was trying to work out exactly why he asked me to welcome you to the law school. I thought it might have something to do with the fact that my wife works with MAC and the Trauma and Learning Policy Initiative. And of course, this has become her incredible passion. And the dean knows I'm a little jealous of the amount of passion she is devoting to this project. And so this might be a way for me to work out the issues I'm developing with that. So that might be why he asked me to welcome you. But I hope that he asked me to welcome you, in fact, because what we should be welcoming is the kind of law you practice. So much of what lawyers do is to imagine that pretty words fix the world. Today I taught constitutional law and introduced the 14th Amendment, passed in 1868, to my students, which declared that we shall all be equal. Those were beautiful words. But it was almost 100 years before they had any effect. And it was more than 100 years before we came to incorporate the values beyond just the law. And what MAC has done, and the Trauma and Learning Policy Initiative since 2004, and MAC at the law school since the 1970s, is to imagine a bigger practice for law. It's about the law, and then the culture within the law, and then the culture within the contexts that the law has to affect. It's about changing all of these together to bring about the ends, the ideals, which it's aimed for. This is something law schools must learn. And I know that when the dean said that this project has been so important to the law school, what he meant was, as our students experience this kind of law, which Hugh B. Jones brought to the law school and which so many students have lived with since, they have a bigger sense of the challenge of equality and justice that we have to bring across the practice of law. So I welcome you to the law school, but I hope I can welcome the practice that you have demonstrated to the law and my students more generally. Welcome, and thank you so much for what you have done.
Hi, I'm Jerry Mogul, MAC's Executive Director, and thank you, Larry, for your really warm and thoughtful welcome to us today, and thank you to Harvard Law School for generously providing this space to us tonight. And thank you to our sponsors, to our funders that are in this room, and to MAC's Board of Directors, the wonderful Board of Directors, for making this evening possible. I do have one public service announcement from MAC's Communications Manager, Lilia Bolekshi. Lilia has also managed this whole process along with Chris and her team. So let's hear, where is Lilia? Where? She's outside. Anyway, Lilia, thank you, Lilia, for doing a great job. So Lilia's message, as our communications manager, her message to you is we encourage you to upload your photos from tonight's event to social media using hashtag MacVoices18 and to follow us on our Facebook and Twitter pages where we'll be sharing our photos from tonight. Okay, so we treasure our long-standing partnership with Harvard Law School and the enormous impact it has had on children in the state and even the nation. This partnership exemplifies MAC's legal advocacy that the potential of each child, especially those who face the greatest barriers, is best reached by establishing rights into law and then fighting like hell to secure those rights by holding our public institutions accountable, whether at an IPT meeting or in the policies of the State Education Department. And so we are here tonight in our penultimate year leading to our 50th anniversary to celebrate the voices of attorneys, advocates, and others who have been instrumental in enabling MAC and our many partners to bend the arc of history in this half-century, however modestly, towards greater justice and opportunity for those children whose potential would otherwise be cut short, whose promise would otherwise be denied. In each of the past 3 years, we have spotlighted a major feature of our advocacy: the impact of trauma on learning, Boston school reform, disability rights. Tonight, we spotlight our legal advocacy, from MAC's very first litigator, Tom Mila. Are you in the room somewhere? Tom? To our current staff of attorneys, advocates, and others, our current staff. Where are you, our current staff? From our colleagues in the legislature who drafted the first special ed law in the nation. Is Bob Crabtree here? I didn't see Bob earlier. No, Bob, no, okay. To the more recent legislative champion of the Chapter 222 school discipline law, Alice Wolf. I know, Alice, you're in the room. I know that. Alice, where are you? Okay. Okay, as you can see, this is going to be a little bit of an interactive exercise, so involving some standing and sitting, so I need your cooperation, and let's be quick about it. Don't be shy. Are you ready? I know you're a little nervous. Okay, let's first recognize those pro bono attorneys who give so willingly of their time to help children and support our systemic advocacy. Attorneys who are in law firms like our longstanding partners, DLA Piper, Cohen Crabtree, and Strong. And we're also pleased to have new friends at Morgan Lewis, and a special shout out to one of our corporate pro bono attorneys at Cypher Shaw. So those folks, stand up, let's go, come on. Okay, but it's got to be quick. It's got to be like a sit and stand, and the applause can't last too long. Quick applause, all right? Attorneys in small firms or solo practice give so generously of their time and make a difference in the lives of children when they take a case from us. So please stand up, our private bar attorneys who just are so wonderful, pro bono attorneys for us. Don't be shy, don't be shy, don't be shy. We know you're out there, I know you're out there. And we're also fortunate to have a volunteer attorney on our staff, Elizabeth Dion. Elizabeth, who has made an enormous difference in the lives of children that she has represented at MAC. And is Bill Crane here? Yes. Bill Crane, the former BSA hearing officer, was a volunteer at MAC for 3 years, providing expert legal advice to all MAC staff and others. Now, public interest attorneys devote their careers to providing access to justice for all and work in institutions such as legal aid organizations, law schools, and law firms. In our role, MAC's role as a statewide center in the legal aid community, we convene and lead key coalitions which are composed of many public interest attorneys and advocates. Those of you in that category, please stand up and be recognized. Elizabeth, come on, and I know you were like waiting before. Any others who want to stand up? Our law school folks, our Al Wallace, I know you're out there somewhere too. And we mentioned Harvard Law School earlier. I want to thank another professor at the law school, Einar Elhaig, who along with his wife Julia have been such strong supporters of the work of our Autism Center. So thank you, Einar and Julia. Special education advocates play a very important role in helping parents navigate the barriers and obstacles that hold back their children with disabilities. Some of them have generously provided support by volunteering, along with attorneys, on our helpline. We can't thank you enough who have really helped us, advocates and attorneys on our helpline. Are you out there? No? Okay, then you don't get any applause then if you're not out there. And we can't successfully represent the interests of children without the support of expert evaluators, some of whom also generously provide pro bono support for our clients, from companies like NESCA, the Eli Center, Boston Ability Center, New England ABA, ICCD, ABLS, Peer Projects, and Apex Behavioral Consulting. Come on, come on, come on. We also have with us friends who are formerly in the legislature, along with Alice Wolf. We have Tom Santacandro. Tom, I know you're out here. Former state rep. now the head of the Institute for Community Inclusion at UMass Boston, and MAC staff alumni are now on the Boston City Council. Kim Janey. Kim. Speaking of MAC staff and board members, we have more than a few here tonight. Some of you from the 1970s and some of you more recent. So anyone who used to work at MAC, not current MAC staff, we don't want you leaving MAC just to stand up. But if you used to work at MAC or was a board member at MAC, please stand up because you're a really important part of this family. As you can see, MAC is a powerful force. We are an extraordinarily important organization with a rich history. Our board and staff are using the occasion of our 50th anniversary to take a step back to look at where we have been, what we've accomplished, and where we are going. Without missing a beat from the day-to-day advocacy, we will spend the next year during our golden anniversary renewing our vows, our promise to you, our supporters, and to the children and families we serve, that we will remain faithful to our mission of removing barriers so that children without resources, children who face discrimination, and children who are falling behind will thrive and be successful. Many of you have heard that I intend to leave my position at MAC and pass the torch in 2019 to a new leader to carry the organization forward. But make no mistake, and I'm sure I speak for our board of directors as well, MAC's greatest asset as an organization, the heartbeat of MAC, will always be its incredibly talented and dedicated staff. And knowing each and every one of them as I do, I could not be any more confident of MAC's bright future than I am standing here before you tonight. So to MAC staff, to carry it on, I want to give you some applause. Parents have always been central to MAC's advocacy. They know their children best, and they are their fiercest advocates. We advise them on helpline. We represent them in special education advocacy. We offer them trainings and education so they can better advocate for their children. And we mobilize them into a political force to advocate together with us in the legislature and sometimes in local school districts. We're fortunate this evening to have a parent with us, Uresa Rizzo, whose child we represented and who has become a powerful advocate in her own right. MAC has been working with parents of children with autism in Lawrence for over 10 years, and led by Leslie Hughes, our Autism Center Public Information Specialist, we provide training and technical assistance on special education rights for their children and on how to advocate at the school, municipal, and state levels for all children with autism and other disabilities in Lawrence. So Leslie, please come up and introduce our parent speaker.
Thank you, Jerry. I got to know our next speaker, Uresa Rizzo, when she started coming to MAC's Lawrence Autism Public Parent Group meetings. The parent group was started 12 years ago when a young Latina mother with a child with autism from Lawrence attended an event where Ann Guay was speaking. Ann is a previous MAC staff and board member, and she was speaking about her successful advocacy getting school services for her son with autism. After the presentation, this mother, empowered by Ann's words, up and followed her into the bathroom. She followed Ann to ask for help. She asked, "Can you help me get the same special education laws in Lawrence that you have in the town that you live in?" As we know, special ed laws in Massachusetts are the same in every city and town in the Commonwealth, yet there are huge inequities in accessing services guaranteed by the law. The young mother's question to Ann was the impetus for the creation of the Lawrence Autism Parent Group. Soon after Ann met this mother, MAC went to Lawrence to meet with her and other Latino parents to see how we could help. Over the years, the group has grown and parents have learned how to advocate for their own children. They also learned to advocate for systemic changes that have impacted children with autism and other disabilities in the district. Out of this parent group came one of the most remarkable people I have had the privilege of getting to know, our next speaker, Uresa Rizzo. Uresa started coming to our parent meetings several years ago. I was immediately impressed with her eagerness to learn, her fierce advocacy commitment, not just to her own child with autism, but to all students with disability in Lawrence. Her accomplishments are many, including her work as a chairperson as the Lawrence Special Ed Parent Advocacy Council, her position on the district's Inclusion Steering Committee, and her work with the Lawrence Mayor's Office to create summer programming for children with disabilities. And she is also a community organizer with Lawrence Public Works. Uresa goes above and beyond to make sure parents' voices are heard in her community. Please join me in welcoming Uresa to the stage.
Good evening. My name is Uresa Rizzo. My son, Alejandro, is 13 years old and has autism and attends Lawrence Public Schools. He is a very friendly, happy, caring, resilient, loving, and affectionate child. He is a nonverbal with limited speech, with a clearly huge potential to learn and desire to communicate with others. I first met Mac through one of the Autism Center's workshop conducted in Lawrence. Leslie Hughes invited me to come to Mac's Lawrence Parent Group meetings. At the time, Ale was at a segregated school for children with autism. I brought up the idea of inclusion with the school, but they said it wouldn't work, and I assumed I didn't have any other choice. As I started going to the Autism Center Parents Group meetings, I learned about special education laws, advocacy techniques, and learned that parents have a right to have their voices heard. I also learned specifically about the law's mandate to provide inclusive options for kids with disabilities. I started thinking more about inclusion and realized how much Alejandro wanted to be included with his non-disabled peers. In the summer of 2015, Alejandro participated in a vacation Bible school program at our church. And it was at this event that Alejandro proved to me that he was able to learn in a setting with his regular ed peers. After his Bible lesson, I asked him what he had learned. And to my surprise, his answer were whale, referring to the story of Jonah, and boat, chicken, cow, horse, referring to the story of Noah's Ark. At that moment, I realized that he was able to learn these lessons in the least restricted setting, taught by a volunteer at our church with absolutely no special training on how to teach a child with special needs. The workshop has helped me realize that the law recognized that my input mattered and that I knew my child's best. I decided to ask Mac for help in advocating for Alejandro. I am so grateful because Mac referred me to a pro bono attorney, Chris Sweeney, from Kavanaugh Law Firm. With his help, I was able to get Ale into an inclusive setting. He was one of the first children who moved from the segregated school to a regular ed middle school. This was a huge step forward and has made such a difference. Alejandro loves his new school, and he loves dance, theater, and art programs that weren't available at his segregated school. When he first started the inclusion program, he would say, "New school," every morning as he was getting ready to go to school, which was a confirmation to me that he was happy with his change and looked forward to his school day. He is now included in academics and is doing great. He is excited to continue to participate in dancing and theater at school. He recently received a new communication device, which has helped him become very independent. In fact, recently, he took the initiative and put picture here, meaning he wanted the picture of a certain individual in his device. Alejandro has learned to identify the individuals around him and shows interest in learning their names. At church, he requests the pictures of our elders since they give him candy during the service. Alejandro has now learned their names and uses their names in full sentences when needed. It is clear that Alejandro has so much more potential than anyone seemed to realize. I am thrilled to see his growth in communication and independence. I am glad I was able to get Alejandro included, but I wasn't done. I knew that other parents in my community also face these barriers. I'm proud to say that with Mac's support, I was elected chair of the Lawrence CPAC on June 2017. And my proudest accomplishment is being a parent leader for the Lawrence Inclusion Steering Committee created as a result of Mac's advocacy. The committee is made out of teachers, inclusion specialists, administrators, and parents. This committee has been critically important in making sure that Alejandro and other kids are successfully included in the district with the services and supports they need to succeed. Alejandro is not alone. As a result of the Autism Center intensive advocacy, many kids have made huge gains just like Alejandro. The district used to have such lowered expectation for our kids. They assumed it was best to isolate our kids because they didn't think our kids were capable of gaining academic skills, and they didn't think our kids would be able to learn and contribute in a mainstream setting. With MAC's support, Lawrence parents have demanded more for our children, and the district has seen that our kids exceed their lowered expectations. I am so grateful to MAC's Autism Center for giving me the tools I needed to advocate for my son and for others parents in my community. Thank you to all of you for supporting their work.
I now have the honor of welcoming the Honorable Julian Houston, retired Justice of the Superior Court of Massachusetts, to the stage. Julian Houston embodies MAC's mission to be a voice for the most vulnerable. Judge Houston has always used the law as a powerful force for systemic change. He was a former staff and board member of MAC back in the day. He joined MAC in its early days to lead a student-led project in the midst of school desegregation in Boston in the mid-1970s. As a Roxbury District Court judge, we're going through your bio really kind of fast, you know. We're skipping a lot of things, right? But that's okay. As a Roxbury District Court judge, Julian Houston established the first court child care center in the state and founded Roxbury Youth Works to give children and young adults a safe space and to reduce recidivism. When he became a Superior Court justice, he continued to give back by founding the George L. Ruffin Society, supporting people of color involved in the legal profession and the legal system. He recently established a permanent exhibit located at the Brook Courthouse called The Long Road to Justice, the African American Experience in the Massachusetts Courts. We thank Judge Houston for his civic leadership, and we are honored to call you tonight as a part of MAC's family and to warmly and welcome you as our keynote speaker.
Thanks very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, particularly among so many friends. My association with MAC goes back 30 years or more. I look at the faces in this audience. I see Larry Brown, who was the executive director when I first got involved with MAC, and of course Hubie, who is responsible for all of us being here. I'm just very touched, very moved to be among you, and particularly touched to be asked to speak with you this afternoon. I was born in Richmond, Virginia in 1944, just before the end of the Second World War. In those days, the law required the city of Richmond, including the public schools, to be completely segregated by race. And I attended all black schools until I was 15 years old. This was not a state of affairs that the black community accepted passively. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund, led by Thurgood Marshall, brought a series of lawsuits throughout the South, alleging that racial segregation in public schools violated the Constitution, the constitutional rights of Black children, and these cases culminated in the Supreme Court's historic 1954 decision in Brown versus Board of Education, a decision that found racially segregated schools unconstitutional. I vividly recall May 17th, 1954, the day the Brown decision was announced, in part because Spotswood Robinson, a family friend and neighbor, was one of the lawyers who wrote the brief in the Brown case. The lawyers had delivered us from segregation. Unfortunately, we were to discover the Brown case was not successful in achieving the goal of integrating education, which was, after all, the objective of the decision. Today, the typical Black student nationally now attends school where only 29% of his or her fellow students are white, down from 36% in 1980. In fact, Black children are more racially and socioeconomically isolated than at any time since data has been collected. And yet, we still must acknowledge the extraordinary impact that Brown has made in focusing our attention on the constitutional rights of Black children. 15 years later, Mac's predecessor, the Task Force on Children Out of School, was formed, and a year later, in 1970, published its groundbreaking study, The Way We Go to School. In doing so, Mac forced the courts and the Massachusetts legislature to acknowledge how Black children and special needs children were being excluded from school and denied an education. With the passage of Chapter 766, the first law in the nation to provide for the education of special needs children, Mac helped pave the way for a generation of students, Black, Latino, Asian, and white, that had been previously overlooked and underserved to get an education. From its earliest days, Mac has relied upon the law to support Massachusetts school students in obtaining their rights under the Massachusetts Constitution. At the same time that Chapter 766 went into effect in 1974, after a lengthy trial, Federal Judge W. Arthur Garrity ruled that the Boston public schools were de facto racially segregated and ordered system-wide busing as a remedy. The following year was chaotic, and I can tell you it was chaotic, and Larry and Huey know exactly what I mean. There was widespread resistance to busing among white students and parents, and confusion within the schools. In the midst of this confusion, MAC organized Project Interaction, a 4-day visit to Boston by 40 Black and white Southern public school students who had firsthand experience with court-ordered busing and were willing to offer reassurance to Boston students. Meetings were arranged between Southern students and their parents and teachers and their Boston counterparts, and discussions were held to begin a dialogue. MAC also opened its first child advocacy unit for lawyers to represent Black students who were being suspended from the Boston schools at alarming rates. MAC's commitment to keeping children in school continues to this day. More recently, MAC's attorneys and staff have worked with colleagues on the Education Law Task Force under the leadership of State Representative Alice Wolf to draft and enact Chapter 222 of the Acts of 2012. MAC's leadership in the Education Law Task Force helped create new due process and data reporting requirements for school districts throughout the Commonwealth. We are a far cry from the days when a principal could arbitrarily banish a student from school, and we have MAC and its lawyers and staff to thank in large part for the progress. Today, MAC and the Education Law Task Force continue to work with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to implement Chapter 222 and monitor its impact on students. The data shows some improvement in lowering the rates of suspension, but there remains room for improvement as both students of color and students with disabilities continue to be suspended at higher rates than their peers. Segregating Black children in inferior schools and excluding them unfairly are two sides of the same discriminatory coin. Schools cannot be integrated unless the neighborhoods where they are located are integrated, in particular by making housing opportunities for low-income Black urban residents available in white middle-class suburbs. Unless we desegregate neighborhoods, we cannot desegregate schools. And unless we desegregate schools, the doors to opportunity for too many Black students will continue to be closed. This represents a continuing challenge to MAC and its lawyers, as well as to the law itself. There are other challenges facing MAC in the days ahead. Coming to grips with the process through which students are pushed out of schools and into prisons is high on the list. The criminalization of youth is an inevitable byproduct of disciplinary policies and practices that put students into contact with law enforcement, and we must recognize the impact that this has on the young. The school-to-prison pipeline has become a reality for far too many Black and Latino young people, and in the days ahead, it will fall to organizations like MAC to use the new Chapter 222 to correct the harm these practices are doing by our educational system. We face a troubling and uncertain future. Our country is more divided than at any time within memory. But change will come, and Massachusetts will continue to be at the forefront of change for those who need it most. Stand with MAC and stand with our commitment to each other as we march forward together.
Thank you, Judge Houston. Really inspiring. If I could call up to the stage MAC Chair Eileen Haggerty, MAC founder UB Jones, and MAC's first Executive Director Larry Brown.
Okay. Judge Houston, we would like to thank you with a token of appreciation for speaking tonight and for being a friend of MAC and an advocate for children throughout your illustrious career. Okay. Okay.
I guess I should put my hand on it.
And the inscription on the clock says, "The Honorable Julian T. Houston, with our deepest appreciation for your outstanding civic leadership and lifetime dedication to using the law as a force for good. Celebrating Voices annual event, October 30th, 2018.
Thanks.
And to close the program, I would now like to call up Ann Guay, Chair of the Friends of the MAC Autism Center and former board and staff member of MAC, along with her husband Marty Guay, a current member of the MAC Board of Directors.
I think the last time we did this was at our wedding, so bear with it. Before I begin my remarks, I just want to, again, thank Harvard Law School for hosting us tonight, Judge Houston for such powerful remarks. It left everyone in the room speechless. Professor Lessig and also Uresa Rizzo for such a compelling story of how MAC has been able to help her son. Normally, when parents like Marty and I are asked to speak at events like this, the story has a certain arc. There's talk of obtaining a diagnosis, accessing services, and then eventually getting into a great school that pretty much solves for most of your problems. What we can say is that our son Brian is one of the luckiest people we know. He has a family who loves him, and he gets up every single day and gets to go to a job that he loves. Not many people can say that. Granted, our life has had its challenges, but we are very lucky to live where we live because Brian was always able to access the services that he needed. Having parents like us didn't hurt either. Over the years, Brian just made tremendous progress. Last year, he was Associate of the Quarter at our local Home Goods. It's a very competitive group. It was wonderful. It was more than we ever could have hoped for. And wherever we go, people always remark about how well Brian has done. But I always knew deep down, after I started working at MAC, that everyone was not as lucky as we were. One day I was picking our son Brian up at school in Andover. As we were leaving the building, a school bus driver waved to me and asked if I had a few minutes to talk. She was driving a special education van for another school system and was waiting for the students to come out. She commented on how well Brian was doing and remarked that she'd seen him made so much progress over the years as he got older and couldn't get over how much he was talking all the time. She told me that she liked to get to school early every day and watch him and other students come out so that she could listen really closely to what the teachers were saying, because she wanted to reach her own son with autism. He was nonverbal and very behavioral. She knew what ABA was, but as she explained, she was a single mom in a town that would never send her son to a school like the one my son attended. She could barely pay her bills, and her son received little in the ways of services. Can you imagine what it would be like to drive a bus to a school every day knowing that your son needed the same services but could never walk in the door? She was a much better mother than I am. Another mother I'd like to tell you about is a client from MAC who was from Haiti. She loved her son and literally did anything for him. Whenever I was going to the State House, we had this deal where she would always come with me, and I kind of wondered, well, does she like me? Does she want to come with me? No, actually, she was much more targeted about it. She told her lawyer the reason she did come was that because as a Haitian woman, she felt she was invisible. But she hoped that if government leaders saw that she was my friend, maybe they would help her son. That's just heartbreaking, and she was never invisible to us. These stories are not unique. There are students all over Massachusetts who have great needs that aren't being met. Fortunately, Mass Advocates is here to help those who struggle. Its accomplishments are many, and yet there's still a lot of work to be done. Marty?
You can stand over here, Ann.
Okay, just like the wedding.
After 28 years, I continue to follow Ann, so I too want to, and I know for myself, brevity's the soul of a good close, so I'll be quick on this one. But I did want to, from Professor Lessig starting off, just powerful, through Jerry and Leslie and Uresa and Judge Houston, and just a wonderful night. But I think the call to action here is we're going to be celebrating our 50th anniversary next year, but we're in our 49th year, and there's a lot of work to do here. There is just a lot of work to do after 49 years, and we're asking for your help tonight. We're at $84,000 of a $100,000 campaign. Nickels turn into dollars, dollars turn into action. So whatever you can do to help us out, please do, because as you can hear from some of these stories, what you do today echoes into the future, and what you don't do today rings hollow in the future. So we're looking for your help. There's a lot of people here who will do the work. We do need money, so this is the ask. But I think the judge said it very, very well, Judge Houston. Who's going to stand up for MAC? Who's going to stand up? So we're just asking for a few more to stand up. Thank you.
So for those of you who came in, I'm sure you noticed all the beautiful balloons. They're more than decorations. They're an opportunity for all of us to help support MAC in any way possible. So if you'd like to follow me over to the tables, we have balloons. We're going to ask for donations and come along. Okay, thank you.